Hi, welcome back. This is the third presentation of state and local government. This is again sort of a bottom-up look at federalism, how that relationship between the national government and the state and local governments looks from the perspective of the states. One thing that state governments and that many local governments have is this idea of direct democracy. It's often described as plebiscitary democracy, where you actually place issues directly before the people for rejection or approval. And again, it depends oftentimes on turnout. There are a lot of different kinds of referenda and initiatives. I don't think I'm going to make you know all the different kinds. There are 26 states, including Oklahoma, that employ either referenda or initiatives. Remember, the key there is that referenda are basically government initiated, whereas initiatives are petition-driven. There are another 39 states that have constitutional provisions for recall of public officials, and 19 states allow for the recall of statewide elected officials. There are significant advantages and disadvantages to plebiscitary democratic mechanisms like this. On the one hand, especially from the perspective of state officials, it puts them in a perspective where they can kind of punt on an issue and say, this is controversial, this is something that might cost me votes in the next elections, let's let the people decide. On the other hand, it can also lead to a little bit of laziness and situations where you basically get government by plebiscite. This is something that has roiled California's governments, in the past several decades. In fact, these days now, with the Democrats having such a dominant advantage, they don't have to rely as much on propositions to get things done. But again, one of the problems with, government by plebiscite is that powerful interests can basically just run campaigns constantly on narrow issues and can do things that can actually impede governance quite a bit. Oklahoma's constitution is a product of its time, and by that, again, we came to statehood with the Enabling Act of 1906. The movement towards statehood came with the 1889 land run into Oklahoma Territory. There is a legal reason why no state in the Union is majority Native American. Prior to the mid-20th century, federal law prohibited the formation of a state if most of its inhabitants were non-white. Something to keep in mind. India and Oklahoma Territory each had 55 delegates, united in their hostility to big banking and railroads. And why was that? Most of the interests in Oklahoma in the early 20th century were agriculturally oriented and oil and gas related, and they relied on transportation. And the railroads had kind of an effective monopoly, and they charged high rates, and that made them very unpopular with the people who needed their services. The progressive era informed the values of the state's inhabitants at statehood. The result is the state's constitution is very long and frankly very progressive. If you understand what the progressive era really meant. State legislatures make major policy decisions that affect the day-to-day lives of their state's residents. So state legislatures are very important institutions of democratic governance. Most state legislative bodies bear a resemblance to the federal Congress. They are bicameral. They have an upper chamber and a lower chamber. Term limits have confined state legislative office holders to a finite number of terms. Oklahoma's term limits confine Oklahoma legislators to 12 years of total service, regardless of which state legislative body they serve in. Again, political parties organize the state legislatures, except when they don't. Oftentimes you'll get, again, divided government, which can alternatively create strong incentives for compromise, but it can also create strong incentives and strong realities of gridlock, where both sides basically say, no, I want my way, no, I want my way, and they basically try to play a game of chicken with the government, and the result is nothing gets done. There are three basic themes of city governments. Commission-style governments, it's the oldest form of government, which separates the executive branch officials by executive functions like public safety, public works, finance, parks and recreation, community development. Commission system is highly decentralized, which creates a great deal of room for inefficiency and corruption. Many county governments remain set up on commission principles. If you look at Rogers County, where our Claremore campus is located, you'll find that there are separate independently elected county officials. There are 3 county commissioners, and they generally wield the most influence at the county level, and there are about 4,000 counties in the United States. But there are also, several other officials like the county sheriff, the assessor, the treasurer, the registrar, the county clerk, among other positions. And again, it's highly decentralized, very little likelihood of kind of tyranny by centralization, but lots and lots of room for corruption. Council manager systems are very important. Again, separate political dimensions of city government from the administration of the policies. In other words, you'll have an elected city council. They'll hire a city manager to implement the council's policies. City manager is typically a civil servant, and their job is to manage the day-to-day operations of the city. Frequently, as towns grow, they require more expert management, and sometimes you'll have a mayor, and then they'll also hire a city manager to do things that are kind of more technically oriented. You also have what are known as mayor-council systems. Some of the larger cities have what are known as strong mayor systems, where the mayor really wields a great deal of executive authority. And then you have a city council. Tulsa has actually a strong mayor system, and the city council is oftentimes very, very restive and very fractious. So, county governments, again, are the oldest and largest of the local governments. There's extreme variance in geographic size and population density. The smallest of the U.S. states, Connecticut and Rhode Island, don't even have county governments. They abolished their entire county level government in 1960. The most densely populated county in the United States is Los Angeles County, not surprisingly, with nearly 10 million residents. In contrast, Loving County in the panhandle of Texas has fewer than 100 inhabitants distributed over 673 square miles. Oklahoma has similar variance. The largest Oklahoma county, Osage, has around 47,000 inhabitants that are distributed over 2,304 square miles, while the largest populated county, Oklahoma County, has nearly 720,000 inhabitants spread over 709 square miles. So again, important stuff. County governments are created to act as agents of state governments for carrying out essential functions. Again, some of those essential functions are going to be healthcare, rural hospital, rural mass transit, industrial development, social services, and consumer protection. That's why you have a county sheriff to protect people from fraud and other things like that. In rural states, county governments control vast budgets and historically were subject to lax oversight, resulting in massive levels of corruption. In the 1980s, the FBI launched a far-ranging investigation of the activities of county elected officials throughout Oklahoma and used undercover agents to infiltrate offices, secretly taped backroom deals, and they obtained literally hundreds of felony convictions of Oklahoma county officials. It became known as OK Scam. It was the biggest corruption case the FBI ever investigated. 162 commissioners or former commissioners in 61 of Oklahoma's 77 counties, as well as 67 vendors who sold them supplies, were ultimately convicted. And it contributed a great deal to anti-government animus among Oklahomans, and it fell heavily on the Democratic Party. Again, city and county governments are often pitted in competition with one another over finite resources. So it's very important, especially here in Oklahoma. Most of the municipal governments, they have no access really to ad valorem taxes. They are entirely dependent on sales taxes. Special districts fill in the blanks of local government. There are three pathways to the creation of special districts, two basic categories. First, there are general purpose districts, and there are county and municipal governments that we've been discussing. The second type are single purpose districts. As the name suggests, it focuses on a single issue. And then you have special districts, which are neither fish nor fowl in that they aren't a county or municipal government, but have several mandates. If you think of the Grand River Dam, that is a good example of a local special purpose, district. Special districts are often formed due to jurisdictional and funding challenges. The proliferation of special districts in local government kind of is an indicator of the challenges that are related both to democratic accountability and to adequate funding of local governments. School districts provide a sense of identity but present political challenges. Again, most schools, you want to have local control. Parents want to know that the people in the schools are people that are in their districts and have the same kind of values. But that's balanced against the cost of maintaining a large number of very small and often cash-strapped school districts. Many states have gone through rounds of school consolidation where you basically pool the resources. Conservatives call for reforms are based around the idea of school choice, and they include the advocacy of vouchers, which is basically money that in the form of a voucher that a parent can apply to send their kids to a different school, and or charter schools, which basically act independently of school districts and have greater latitude in terms of forming curricula and hiring and firing decisions. Rural communities are struggling. 97% of the nation's landmass is categorized as rural, and roughly 60 million Americans live in rural areas, whereas you have close to 300 million Americans living in large urban areas. 44% of Oklahoma's population live in its three largest counties, Cleveland, Tulsa, and Oklahoma counties. So what factors are contributing to the death of America? And again, part of it, youth drain. A lot of people that are raised in rural areas, want to get out. They want to go someplace where there are more opportunities, where there's simply more people, more things to do. So the result is you have a rapid graying of rural America. The population is aging at precisely that time when there are fewer and fewer resources being dedicated to rural healthcare. And again, you also have a lack of reliable internet access that places rural children at serious educational disadvantages and creates local or rural businesses. It creates a challenge for them as well. The last slide here is Native American tribes are domestic dependent nations. Even though Native Americans occupy this legally distinct position among American citizens, they only achieved citizenship status in 1924. The U.S. Census estimates that 5.2 million Americans identify as at least part Native American or Alaskan Native. 2.9 Americans self-identify solely as Native American or Native Alaskans. California and Oklahoma rank first and second in the percentage of Native American citizens. The treatment of Native Americans under American law has varied widely over the course of American history, from straight up harshly discriminatory to relatively tolerant, and back to sort of schizophrenic to some extent. American Native tribes have won the right to conduct gaming on reservation lands and use the windfall to promote the tribe's human capital. That began with the United States versus Lara in 2004. And again, the court acknowledged the oscillating legal status of Native Americans, alternating between removal, assimilation, and respect for distinctive tribal cultural identity. In California versus Cabazon Band of Mission Indians in 1987, courts ruled that Native American tribes could set up gaming operations independently of state regulations. And again, some states have made it harder for Native Americans to vote. They have, for example, insisted that there be a street address, and in many reservations, they simply don't have such things. Finally, in 2020, McGirt versus Oklahoma, the Supreme Court held that much of eastern Oklahoma remained reservation land for the purposes of criminal law enforcement, meaning that Native Americans accused of a crime on reservation land have to be tried in either native courts or in federal court. So that's it for this slide. We've got one more presentation to go before we're done with our state and local government supplement. I'll see you next time.